America, Letter of Warning to a Young Patriot, Naomi Wolf has compiled a case against the Bush administration and Congress in what she believes are actions to reduce the civil liberties of the American populace. Ms. Wolf presents 10 steps that range from the establishment of secret prisons to the restriction of the press that she argues history has shown are used to shut down free societies. Naomi Wolf discusses her book with Viet Den, former Assistant Attorney General from 2001 to 2003, who assisted in the development of the USA Patriot Act. Mr. Den is currently a law professor at Georgetown University.
Hello, we are here with Naomi Wolf, the author of The End of America, A Letter of Warning to a Young Patriot. Ms. Wolf, of course, comes to this conversation very well qualified as a public intellectual, and the book is a fascinating reading book, and the back cover it says, "The End of America will shock, enrage, and motivate." Let me start by asking you, what is it that drove you to write this book?
Yeah, thank you. It was for a very personal reason. I teach young leaders at an institute that I co-founded, and we, of course, need young Americans to be well-educated in democracy and passionate about the founder's vision. And I was mentoring a young woman named Jennifer Gandon, a wonderful young woman. She was marrying a wonderful young man named Chris Lee. And I was reading histories of closing societies at the time. And at Jennifer and Chris's wedding, I realized that the storm clouds were really gathering if I didn't give them a gift and really give their peers a gift, which nobody really seems to be giving them, of a guideline, sort of user's guide to democracy in easy to understand, accessible language, a kind of shortcut to the founder's vision. And not only that, but also a kind of primer for how societies have closed down in the past, how democracies have been undermined in the past. Because what I was seeing around me was a series of very recognizable systematic assaults on some of the key things that we need to sustain a strong democracy. And just to share why this is especially profound for me as a mother, I have children, and I want them to grow up free. We all want our kids to grow up free, obviously. And Chris's story is especially poignant, and the reason I thought of him so much when I was writing, because when his mom was 28, which is his age now, she took her 4-month-old baby, his name was then Vu, and fled Vietnam, and became a boat person, a refugee, to risk her life and her baby's life to come to this country because, and this was so moving to me, and when I met her, I was so impressed with her. She's such a true American, in the best sense of the founder's vision. She really understood liberty the way the founders would have wanted all of us to understand liberty. And it was so moving to me as a mother to think that she would have made the decision to risk her life so that her child could grow up free. And so it just seemed so important to honor that by writing a primer for young people, really for all Americans, about how to defend democracy when it's under assault, and to recognize the warning signs of pressure on democracy that can really close it down, that history shows can be very effective.
It's a very, very interesting primer and an introduction to the book. I'm most interested when I first started reading through it as an academic by where you start off with respect to sort of state of academia and the role of patriotism and freedom in that world. So if I may, I'll read a quick little excerpt here at page 27. And you write, "In colleges with progressive curricula, the founders, the framers of our Constitution, are often portrayed as, quote, dead white men whose vision was imperfect, who deny women and the poor civil rights, who define an African slave in America as being 3/5 of a person. Old guys in wigs who wrote documents that are now dusty in language that seems to us to be either arcane or to offer sentiments that are so obvious they have now become cliches." And in many ways, you argue against this vision of the founders. Take me through both of those steps. Why do you think it is that in progressive academia there is this denigration of the framers, and then how do you go about espousing a project to reaffirm their relevance in today's society.
I'm so glad you're asking me that question, and this is, I just want to say this is why I love a working democracy, because I think you and I may come from not the same place in the political spectrum, but this is a fruitful and right conversation to have, and my liberal colleagues aren't asking it of me, so I value this. It's really important. The right has made its own mistakes in the colonizing of patriotism as my country right or wrong. I don't think that's what the founders intended at all. I mean, debate was vigorous in their day, as you know better than I do. People, I think, people were using strong language in talking to the opposition, and they were valuing the free exchange of ideas. So that was the right's mistake, but the left made their own mistakes, horrible mistakes, so that when I speak to young people today across the country, a lot of them don't know what democracy is. A horrible study just came out showing that even Harvard freshmen don't really understand basic civics, our basic checks and balances. There's like real civic illiteracy. They don't teach civics anymore in many jurisdictions. I think Maryland no longer teaches middle schoolers civics. So we're growing this democracy illiterate class of young people. But the left also horribly, in the 60s, embraced kind of the tenets of post-Marxism, and a kind of Marxist analysis may be useful for finding out what's wrong, what's driving economic motivators, but it's horrible if you're trying to value 18th century, both liberal and conservative ideals of the freedom of the individual, the rights of men, eventually the rights of women. Those ideas became very old-fashioned on the left, and no one was teaching young people who inherited this left-wing intellectual sort of framework that it wasn't Marxism that's the most radical thing on earth. The most radical thing on earth is what the framers put in place, which is this unbelievably transformative ideal. I mean, no one teaches it to us as passionately, amazingly revolutionary anymore, that they decided, you know what, let's move further out into the unknown in a vision of giving ordinary people autonomy, ordinary people the power to make decisions about their lives and their communities. And so there's no kind of glamorization of the democratic project. And the last thing, which is truly bad, is that identity politics did, it's a legitimate critique. The framers weren't superheroes, and they weren't prophets, and they didn't have, a vision that transcended their century and their time. So yeah, they blew it. They left out, they left out people of color, they left out women, they left out people who didn't have a threshold of a certain amount of property. But that was so much further than anyone had ever gone before that. And what is miraculous to me is that other groups have demanded the expansion of democracy without having to fundamentally transform what the founders set in motion. So we really need to teach young people, and this issue transcends left and right. That's why I'm getting so much support from conservatives as well as liberals who are alarmed about what they see going on to democracy. We need to kind of relearn, the founders' vision, kind of fall in love with it again, because the last thing that happened, which is bad, to your question's point, is that all of us, old and young, left and right, kind of got lazy, and we kind of subcontracted out defending democracy or understanding the Constitution to a professional class. It's like, oh, the accountant will do my taxes, the landscape guy will do the lawn, the politicians will do democracy, or the pundits will talk about democracy, or the constitutional scholars will understand the Constitution. And that is not what the founders intended. That is so an abdication. And it's set in place the danger we're seeing now. It made it possible for people to strip away our freedoms. The founders intended for you and me, not just you are a constitutional scholar, but me, a citizen, a non-lawyer, the person who's teaching my kids, the person who's doing the lawn. The founders intended for us to understand the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, for us to defend it, for us to do freedom, to maintain democracy.